Good evening, soul butterflies. I trust you're having a wonderful Wednesday evening. It's been rather cold this past month, so let's warm it up. You are listening to Somafusion Radio with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara, coming to you live from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. We are broadcasting to you live worldwide this fine evening on Facebook Live, soma-fusion.com, YouTube, and the official somafusionmedia.com website. For those who do not know who I am or what I do outside of this radio show, I am an Australian native whose full-time writes and talks continue to reach a worldwide audience while I continue breaking ground in alternative metaphysical science, thought and research, journalism, public speaking, illustration, and soulful emotional therapy. But professionally, I am a psychologist, research scientist, teacher, and practitioner specializing in eco-psychology, cognitive and social and evolutionary psychology, integrative holistic psychology, metaphysical science, and meta-psychoanalysis. I am an advocate of human rights and access to justice, the development of healthy interpersonal relationships, trauma healing, and sovereign empowerment of men and women worldwide to reach the highest human potential to help people see themselves no longer as victims of any situations or hardships that they might encounter throughout their lives. Much to discuss on Somafusion Radio tonight, and I hope you have your pens and paper handy. And if you don't, just listen because you can catch the archive of this show later. But first, if you support me in my work, you can make a donation via PayPal or at Patreon at patreon.com/somafusion. I want to mention about the Somafusion Academy, and I encourage you to come and join my courses. For more information on Somafusion Academy, go to soma-fusion.com. You can download the app, or you can just email me with your queries at somafusionacademy@gmail.com. I am also the co-host of another radio show, Dr. Margaret and Dr. Katie Speaks. We discuss various topics from life, relationships, spirituality, metaphysics, psychic development, and psychology. We don't hold anything back, so don't miss that show starting at 8 p.m. every Saturday evening. Stay tuned to all social media platforms and at somafusionmedia.com for all show times and keep up with all of my work and any announcements. You can make inquiries at somafusionmedia@gmail.com. I want to also mention about the Katie Kamara Healing Center in Rakai, Uganda. Myself and the Somafusion brand is a patron and is actively working with the rural community of womanhood empowered in Rakai district of Uganda. The women in the rural community aptly named the Katie Kamara Healing Center in honor of my work. We are committed to provide medical services, including a small birthing center, holistic healthcare, and education to serve approximately 1,000 rural women. The Katie Kamara Healing Center is currently being built to enable, sustain, and empower a thriving rural community of women and children who lack the basic resources, skills, and education to have the best quality of life a human can have now and for the future generations to come. In time COVID stabilizing, I will be mobilizing a team of volunteers to travel with me to stay and work in the new community. There is always an opportunity for you to be a part of it as a volunteer, contributor, or investor. Our goal is to provide a temporary building currently being sought out to be rented out for 12 months in Rakai, Uganda, as the first step to providing security and stability for many women and children who need access to services, resources, and education sooner rather than later. You can reach out to me with your inquiries, or if you want to be a part of it, via email at Katie Kamara Healing Center with an RE at gmail.com. If you would like to contribute, please go to Fundly, say FUNDLY.com/Katie-Kamara-Healing-Center. But I want to welcome everybody to the first show of Somafusion Radio of 2022. For those who have wondered where I'd gone over the past 9 months, my sincere apologies for disappearing. I had a lot of trauma recovery and emotionally I wasn't ready to do a show. So due to the trauma of intimate partner violence experienced in January 2021. Now, as you may very well know, Somafusion as a brand and its radio show hosts are very, very dedicated, strong supporters of domestic violence and the elimination of violence against women, gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and human trafficking. And we will continue to advocate for global action to increase awareness and share knowledge and innovations through our shows presented on Somafusion Media. My prolific writes and that includes my upcoming courses that are specifically designed for trauma recovery and more specifically this show. I'm also a very strong advocate of 22 a day, veteran suicide awareness, the LGBTQA++ and polyam community, and all persons of disability. I will stand up and hold a heart for those who have known rejection, bullying, depression, anxiety, fear, trauma, mocking, belittling, harassment, loneliness, abandonment, and exploitation and abuse of all kinds. I will be on the side of the afflicted, the misunderstood, the marginalized, and the outcasted. I will hold a space for the one in the midst of struggle, always and every time. Throughout the year, there will be many things that will help you on your journey. To reach out to each and every one of you, I am dedicated to helping all of you become equipped with the knowledge and skills necessary to create more equitable learning opportunities, increase academic and personal achievement, and build authentic and caring relationships with diverse people, guided by the belief that we should be ready to embrace, empower, educate, and include all. Increasing knowledge in creating positive learning environments through culturally responsive and equity-based practices is my priority. By encouraging everyone to use their minds in new ways, by consciously enhancing awareness and creativity in the human mind, or what some might call inner space. Some believe we only use 10% of our mind's potential, and I'm going to help you build that consciousness so that you can develop and use the other 90%. Thus producing conscious leaders who speak with integrity, lead with authenticity, and hold themselves accountable, who listen with the intent to understand and not just respond, and do it by being in tune with themselves and the world around them. Above all, my mission is to promote, protect, and advance the interests of scientifically oriented and metaphysical psychology in research, application, teaching, and the improvement of human welfare. For new listeners who have never listened to Somafusion Radio, it comes as no surprise. I am a radio show host who likes to raise awareness and educate and empower others to reach individual potential, mind, body, and soul. Being in the moment can transform even an ordinary circumstance into a profoundly moving experience while living in the moment. But one thing I love to delve into is hard topics, especially those that are extremely taboo and critically controversial or extremely academic to those who are involved in their own beliefs. I explore them with critical, open thinking and express them without judgment and social inclusion of all. One thing I'll never do on my show is express for you to exclusively jump on my boat of values, beliefs, and ideologies, but share them with you as a process of diverse learning as a unified, harmonious community. With that said, I encourage each and every one of you listeners out there who are listening to join in our conversation on the live streams on Facebook and YouTube. But please be reminded of this. You don't have to believe anything I say on this show. And most important thing for you to do is to research and learn for yourself with a curious, open mind. Now, tonight's topic is exclusively a topic that is also close to my heart, and being that today is the second day of the second month of the year 2022, I will be covering this topic this evening. As we talk about it, I'm going to go all different angles. So excuse why I digress, because I think there's a lot more to the topic itself. And the topic we're going to talk about tonight is destiny and free will. How much in life is predestined, or is life completely predestined? Does karma play a role? And what percentage of our lives is a result of the choices that we make? To better understand this, one needs to understand the difference between destiny and free will. Destiny plays an important role, and it is no more than 20% though. And if you operate in the right environment conducive to your karma, tap into the resources required to execute your plan, stay persistent, your plans will materialize before long. No one has ever won the lotto without being in the possession of a lottery ticket first, whether it was bought or gifted, regardless. This world, the whole universe, operates on an interdependent phenomenon. It is interlinked. Every action that you perform can have far-reaching implications, almost like the butterfly effect, where a small change or a slight modification in a complex system can completely alter the final outcome. If you are serious about attaining your goals, you have to operate in the right environment. You cannot practice swimming in a desert. When you engage in a relentless pursuit in a supporting environment, your chances of gaining access to the right resources increase automatically. A little is left thereafter. So with that said, we're going to go delve into this topic of destiny and free will. And of course, we're going to include a little history, and we're going to go into fate and karma and all sorts of things. So stick with me. You are listening to Soma Fusion Radio with Dr. Katie Kamara on the Somafusion Media. For more information, please look me up on social media or go to my website, soma-fusion.com or somafusionmedia.com. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe at this show and let the whole world know what we're learning each week. Invite them to listen with us. When we come back, we'll switch gears and we will talk all about destiny and free will.
I found love in a moment. I watched your breath as it touched the wind, as it painted the open air, and it came to rest on my skin. I don't know if you noticed, but I found my heart in that moment. As we stood by the ocean, you reached for my hand and you said my name. Every word I heard poetry. I saw laughter upon your face. I don't know if you noticed, but I wrapped my heart in that moment. With your arms on my shoulders and that look in your eyes, I knew you and I were the same. There I danced in your aura, where you led me inside, guiding me into somewhere safe. I found home. Home, there we lay by the water, almost asleep as I heard you say, I don't know if we're meant to be, though this certainly feels like fate. I don't know if you noticed, but I fell in love in that moment. With your head on my shoulder and that look in your eyes, I knew you and I were the same. just talk for days. Through every hour I lie awake. All I know is I found home. I found home. I found home. I found home.
Welcome back to Somafusion Radio. You are listening on Somafusion Media with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara. And tonight we are talking about destiny and free will. Are you really living out your fate, or are you creating your destiny? Fate and destiny are both terms that tend to be used interchangeably in conversations. We hear people saying, he has met his fate, or it must be her destiny. But have you ever wondered what the actual differences between fate and destiny are? Well, let's talk about fate. What is it? Fate comes from a Latin word fatum, meaning that which has been spoken. Therefore, throughout the ages, fate has become associated with that which has been predetermined for our lives. Fate is based on the notion that there is a natural order in the universe that cannot be changed, no matter how hard we try. The ancient Greeks and Romans even believed that three goddesses called Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, or what's called the three fates. And they had the role of determining a person's ultimate life path. Overall, fate tends to have pretty negative connotations. For example, people who experience misfortune often tend to believe that fate is the cause. Pessimistic terms such as to seal one's fate and a fate worse than death all suggest that fate is something undesirable and negative. Spiritually, fate is what occurs when we ignore our life calling and don't actively work to reconnect with our souls, or what's known as our true nature. When we leave our lives up to fate, we are basically handing over the reins of control to other people and outside circumstances. When we don't put any effort into consciously changing and evolving, what happens is fate. Now, let me go into a little bit of history here for you and talk about the three fates. The fates, or the Morai, are a group of three weaving goddesses who assigned individual destinies to mortals at birth. Their names are Clotho, the spinner, Lachesis, the allotter, and Atropos, the inflexible. In the older myths, they were the daughters of nymphs, but later they are more often portrayed as the offspring of Zeus and Themis. In Orphic cosmogony, their mother is said to have been Anarchy, or necessity. Either way, they had enormous power, and even Zeus was unable to recall their decisions. The fates were originally called Moirai in ancient Greece. The word Moira means share or portion of something, whether meal, land, or victory spoils. Compare this with the English word merit, from the Latin term a reward. And by extension, Morai means the apportioners. For example, the ones who give each his own portion of life. The Morai's Roman counterpart were the Pacai, probably because the Romans confused with the origin of their name, thinking it stems from pars, which is the Latin translation of Moira. It's actually derived from parir, to bring forth, which explains why the Pakai were initially birth spirits, and also why the Romans weren't far off when they merged with them, with the Morai. There were three fates. Their names were, again, Clotho, meaning the spinner, Lachesis, the allotter, and Atropos, literally the unturning, or more freely, the inflexible. The fates have at least three different genealogies, two of which go way back to Hesiod. In his Theogony, the poet first informs us that the fates are the fatherless daughters of Nyx, the night, only to later describe them as daughters of Zeus and Themis, and thus sisters of the Horai, Eunomia, Dike, and Irene. Both genealogies make sense. In the first case, the Morai linked through Nyx with death, and in the second, they're clearly associated with the unchanging of order of things. At a later date, in the Orphic cosmology, the fates got a new mother, Ananke and Necessity. Now, you may not understand where I'm going with this, but I'm giving you a little background as to why these words really came out, and the story behind these words. But these words are what we now call in the English language. But they are consistently portrayed as three women spinners. Each of the three fates had a different task, revealed by her very name. And you'll get where I'm going with this in a minute, because it's gonna unravel. Clotho spun the thread of life. Lachesis measured the allotted length, and Atropos cut it off with her shears. Sometimes each of the fates were assigned to a specific period of time. Atropos, the past, Clotho, the present, and Lachesis, the future. The representation of the fates evolved through time, and it seemed that it often depended on the medium through which they were portrayed. Thus, in the visual arts, they were usually depicted as handsome women, but in literature, they were often imagined as both old and ugly. In any case, they are almost always pictured as weaving or binding thread. Sometimes one or all of them can be seen reading or writing the book of fate. And it's difficult to say whether Zeus had anything to say in the matters of fates. But to the ancient Greeks, it seemed that even he wasn't able to overrule their decrees. And thus, even though at one point during the Trojan War, he was aware that his beloved son, Sarpedon, will die at the hands of Patroclus, Zeus can do nothing to save him. Just as well before the duel between Hector and Achilles, the all-powerful god merely weighs their destinies on his golden scales and learns the outcome as opposed to having any control over it. However, the fates and Zeus seem to have an understanding between each other at all times. Their friendship going way back gigantomachy. During it, the fates killed the giants Agrius and Thoas, clubbing them to death with bronze cudgels. They helped Zeus even more when they tricked Xiophas to eating some power-weakening fruits, which they successfully persuaded him to do by convincing him to believe in the opposite. The fates do not appear that frequently in myths. And it is true that they are usually portrayed in attending at births of both mortals and gods. But all in all, they rarely need to intervene in any way whatsoever. There are, however, two interesting exceptions. The only time fate said anything to a mortal was at the birth of Meleager, when they informed his mother, Althea, that her son would live until a log, and then burning in the hearth was burnt entirely to ashes. Naturally, Althea put the log away in a chest and kept it safe for many years. However, when Meleager murdered her brothers, i.e., for example, her uncles, after a quarrel over a boar skin, she threw the log into the fire, thus killing her son. Afterward, out of remorse and despair, she killed herself as well. And only once were the fates deceived by someone, and that someone was none other than Apollo. Upon learning that Admetus, his favorite, was destined to die, Apollo got the fates drunk and persuaded them to spare Admetus' life if he was able to find a substitute. He didn't. But Admetus' wife, Alcestis, ever the epitome of faithfulness and love, voluntarily stepped forth and ultimately saved her husband's life. Now, that is the Greek mythology of the story about fate and destiny and the three fates. If you haven't heard it before, you can look this up. However, you can also go on the archive and re-listen to what I've said. But there are a lot of little things that you might have picked up that you've heard or you may understand about what fate and destiny really is, and derive it from that mythological story. But what is destiny? Destiny has much more positive connotations than fate, deriving from the Latin word destinare. Destiny means that which has been firmly established. While this definition also refers to the idea of predetermined events, destiny is something that we can actively shape and alter. Unlike fate, there is an element of choice in destiny. Qualities such as courage, compassion, willpower, and patience can help to change your destiny. Spiritually, though, destiny is intimately connected to our ultimate path of life. When we choose to step up and take responsibility for our lives, then we are actively shaping our destiny instead of leaving our lives to fate. Fulfilling our destiny involves consciously developing a connection to our deepest inner selves and maturing on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level. So what's the difference? I'm just going to summarize really quickly before I go into depth. What is the difference between fate and destiny? Fate is something which you cannot change. Destiny is that which you're meant to do. While fate is what happens when you don't take responsibility for your life, destiny is what happens when you commit to growing, learning, and taking chances. Being destined for greatness only comes through active and conscious decisions. But fate is what happens when you let other people and external circumstance dictate your life. Now, do we have control? You know, fate and destiny can be perceived as two sides of the same coin. Both are predetermined. But the important thing here is to remember that there are infinite possibilities in life. Fulfilling our destiny means consciously directing the stream of our lives in a certain direction. While subjectively to the ego, this means that we have control and choice. Objectively, there's no such thing as control or choice because the concept of me and you don't exist except in the mind. So to answer the question, do we have control? It's kind of a little paradoxical, and I'm going to get into all of this. We're going to talk about the ego, I'm going to talk about the paradoxical theory. And when I'm talking about the paradoxical theory, we do and we do not have control. However, while we are still operating on the level of that we have a sense of self, which is what I'm talking about is your ego, it is vital that we proactively work to step it up and to take responsibility for our destiny. But I'm going to digress, and I'm going to talk about, and just so that you can further understand what I mean about the paradoxical and the subjective control of the ego, our sense of self. And you have to remember here that humankind is an irrational, contradictory, and endlessly inconsistent species. And that's because of the complexity and the unpredictability of our minds and the fact that most of our behavior is ruled by our subconscious depths. We act in very bizarre ways that often contradict what we feel deep down. And as a meta-psychoanalyst, I've always been intrigued not only by the absurd behavior of others, but the paradoxical behavior that also extends beyond the barriers of logic. Perhaps one of the greatest realizations we can have in life is that everything is not as it seems on the surface, particularly with people. So to be able to clearly see and appreciate the ambiguity and the contradictory nature of everything around us gives us a much deeper understanding and appreciation of others. And I'm going to give you 5 interesting examples of a paradox that I've picked up in human behavior. Remember that not all examples of paradox here are always going to be true. And it may only apply sometimes. The first one. Aggressive self-confidence is a reflection of inner feelings of weakness and inferiority. To overcompensate for feelings of powerlessness, people, often men, replace this with self-enforced self-confidence, aggression, and dominating ways of behavior. Ironically, this often fools the person into believing, at least consciously, that they are an alpha male or female, despite their paradoxical unconscious fear of being a weakling or small. So when you meet a person who is consciously trying to one-up you, this is almost always a reflection of deeper inferiority complex. Number 2, sexual promiscuity is a reflection of inner feelings of ugliness and worthlessness. Particularly in women, sleeping around or being easy is often portrayed as something befitting femme fatales, nymphomaniacs, and sluts. However, beyond that often lies feelings of immense insecurity, particularly in regards to body image and self-esteem. Paradoxically, the more a person sleeps around, the more desirable and therefore worthy, and simultaneously unworthy they feel, escaping and at times returning back to those feelings of worthlessness. Number 3, the sweeter the person is, the more savage they are. Although this is not always the case either, The nicer the person is, the more shadow elements they are often repressing. Unless you are enlightened, it is often not the case that agreeable, easy to live with people are complete saints. In fact, people pleasers are often the most angriest, depressed, and anxious people around because they repress their less socially appealing elements into the shadow and therefore become more internally savage and neurotic. Number 4, the quieter a person is, the louder they are. The polarized personality temperaments of introversion and extroversion provide fascinating examples of paradox in human behavior. While extroverts are very vocal and socially gregarious, by themselves they are quiet, despondent, and restless. Because their outer worlds are so flamboyant and busy, their inner worlds are often empty and quiet. Similarly, while introverts are very socially reserved and silent, internally their worlds are filled with vibrant thought, imagination, and liveliness. Number 5, the funniest people are often the most saddest people. We think of funny people, particularly social clowns and professional comedians, as being innately happy and good-humored people. But strangely enough, the funniest people are often the most saddest people because humor is often used as a defense mechanism against darker emotions. Just look at Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, Spike Milligan, Stephen Fry, Bill Hicks, Peter Sellers, and many other comedians who have either killed themselves, suffered from depression, or any other major mental illnesses, known or unknown. Aside from humor being used to mask deeper issues, comedians are usually immensely intelligent people who can see easily through the lies and illusions of society, using incisive wit to captivate their audiences, revealing the nature of humanity's true insanity. And these are only 5 examples of a paradox that can be seen in mankind. And there are so many more others out there, but I haven't included this. And it's humbling to realize that you can't really take anything or anyone at face value because often there are many deeper forces at work. Now let me ask you, what examples of a paradox in human behavior have you observed? Really actually look at it. And we're going to move on to ego. Now, I know I brought this up in other shows, but it's nice to know about ego and just do a little recap on it, because this actually ultimately is connected. And I hear so many times about the ego should be destroyed. And if you've ever explored the transcendental field of spirituality, you would have discovered that the ego is often spoke about with contempt. Many people carry the belief that the ego needs to be destroyed, muzzled, or even killed. But do we actually need to destroy the ego? And what is the ego really? And furthermore, what can you learn about your ego? The ego is basically your identity, who you think you are. Your ego is usually constructed of a name, a personality, and a story. Within this personal story is a collection of memories, beliefs, impressions, and sensations about who you are, where you came from, and what you're good at and bad at, and what you've experienced, and on and on and on and on and on. Isra Sananda said the ego is a veil between what you think you are and what you actually are. You live under the illusion of the mind, totally unaware that you are directed by a great big load of stories. Your ego was created and is currently maintained by the belief that you are separate from the others and life itself. In other words, your ego believes that you are firmly here and other people are firmly there. That you have a body, life, and personality that is distinctly different from others. And therefore, according to the ego, you are not like other people. You are different. And that is what your thoughts tell you anyway. And as a result of being taught or conditioned to believe that you are a separate individual, you experience fear and suffering. Instead of simply experiencing life in its purity and wholeness, you filter life through your mind. You are taught to live life in duality. Duality is essentially the state of separation. It is the opposite of reality. It is the product of the mind. In duality, we essentially split or divide life. Examples of duality include filtering life through the lenses of right or wrong, good or bad, pretty and ugly, holy and sinful, love and hate. And as a product of living in duality, we create untold amounts of suffering for ourselves because we are no longer open to life. Instead, our lives become centered around judgment, condemnation, and fear. And as a result, we alienate and destroy others who we perceive as being bad, wrong, and sinful, to protect our ideas of what is right and holy. The more deeply we are entrenched in duality, the more we experience problems such as hatred, anger, depression, paranoia, anxiety, and perversion. Not only do we sever ourselves from others, but we are cut off from ourselves as well. Anything within us that we perceive as being evil, bad, wrong, and sinful, we suppress, repress, and deny the existence of. As a result of this repressed energy, our shadow selves grow more and more twisted and destructive and depraved. Unless cleansed through shadow work, this intense suffering is ultimately expressed in our relationships and the world at large. Our physical world is an expression of our collective internal torment. Our lives are an expression of our inner emptiness. Simply looking at the violence and murder and poverty, greed and bigotry and mental illness and environmental degradation shows us how profoundly lost we are as a race. We are lost because we have lost touch with the truth of who we are. And what about the folly of demonizing the ego? I mean, in light of this discovery, it is easy to start believing that the ego is bad. In fact, some spiritual teachers teach that the ego needs to be destroyed. But here's the thing. This is just another trick of the mind. And I have heard so many people in the spiritual community condemn the ego and speak of it with such great resentment. However, the belief that our egos are evil or need to be killed or destroyed is just a reflection of the mind stuck in duality. The ego isn't good or bad, it simply is. We need to realize that the ego is simply just a tool. The ego exists as a biological survival mechanism. The ego also exists as a vehicle for our spiritual growth, for us to become conscious of our own strength, love, and oneness. The ego is a doorway through which we can return to our true nature. You may have heard the expression this expression before. The ego is an illusion. But what the hell does that mean? The ego is an illusion, and therefore it really isn't you, because it is always changing, fluid. In other words, how can anything within you that is subject to birth, change, and decay really be you? Let's try an experiment. After the show, you can go back to this segment and have a look and write this down on a notepad or a Word document if you're on a computer about who you think you are. I've said this many times on other shows about giving this an explanation. I'm going to give you a little activity. So what I want you to do is write down and then read over your words. Who you think you are. And likely you would have written something along the lines of, let's say, I'm Jane Doe, a wife, a mother, and a friend. I'm a fighter, a dreamer, and a spiritual seeker. I'm 40 years old and have 3 children, and I'm a skilled artist. See this description of you? This is your main personal story, the backdrop of your life, of what you think you are. The ego is an illusion because it is simply that, a story created in the mind. And if we use some self-inquiry and apply these questions to that statement, like, how can you be a name if it can easily be changed? You could have well been born into a very different family that named you something else. Or how can you be a body if it is constantly aging, changing, disintegrating, and being replaced with other parts? Your red blood cells live for 4 months. Your white blood cells live for more than a year. Your skin cells live for 2 to 3 weeks. All cells within you are constantly dying and being renewed. So how can you really be your body or your looks? How can you be a personality when it is constantly fluctuating and transforming? Think back to your personality 5 years ago, and then 15 years ago. Did they have the same personality that you do right now? My guess is no. How can you be your emotions when they are constantly coming and going, ebbing and flowing? Not only that, but do you really control your emotions? Where do they come from? Do you really control them? How can you be your thoughts when they are always changing? Not only that, but do you really control your thoughts? Where do they come from? Do you really control them? How can you be your beliefs when you believed 10, 30 years ago isn't what you believe today? Your beliefs are influenced by your conditioning and your upbringing and society. How can they be you or yours? And finally, how can you be your memories when they come and go and even alter? Did you know that there is such a thing as a false memory? When remembering the past, the mind has a tenuous and colored perception that is subject to change and alteration. How can your memory be you? And as we can see, everything that we unquestionably believe we are isn't really us. So what is really us? What has been there all along? And what has been there is to witness everything that has happened in your life. What never changes? What is the most fundamental core of who we are? And to explore that question for a few moments, you realize that it's consciousness. Consciousness is the fabric of all things. In fact, even science has showed everything at its core is energy and vibrating at different levels. In our human experience, presence, consciousness, or spirit manifests inside as the energy that composes in every form. It is hard to really put a word to this experience as language is so limited. The easiest ways to express this presence is you, and it always has been you. And it's through meditation. Meditation or keeping the quiet mind. And it helps you to become simply aware of your thoughts and the space beneath those thoughts. And that space is you. Another common way humankind since the dawn of time has used to experience this truth of being is the ego death. Through psychedelic shamanic plants and brews such as ayahuasca or mushrooms or peyote. Although it is helpful to take such herbs, it isn't compulsory. And these plants are simply just doorways into universal experience or spirit that we are. But while it can take truly a while to realize that you are not the ego, and sometimes much more to integrate this discovery on a deeper level, discovering that everything you believed is false, can be hard to accept. In fact, don't be surprised if you experience a lot of resistance. It's normal. The ego's job is to protect itself in the belief that you are separate from other people and life itself. Experiencing the state of no ego or no self is that spiritual enlightenment that can appear to be extremely depressing and disturbing at first. How can having no me or you be something desirable? And it's always a common question. To answer this, in order to understand, you must experience consciousness itself. Without experiencing the truth that you are, the spiritual search becomes purely intellectual and prone to sabotaging fears. However, once you do experience even in a single moment of consciousness, you will discover for yourself that it is the most liberating, pure, peaceful, passionate, expansive, and loving state possible. Bliss. In fact, consciousness itself is the very embodiment of love, peace, and freedom. And you are this embodiment. You are the truth that you have been seeking for. Untangling yourself from the web of illusion is a process that requires patience, self-discipline, and dedication. And this process isn't for the trendy spirit junkies. It is for the sincere spiritual seekers. And spiritual awakening journey is one that requires courage, radical honesty, and the willingness to let go of all that you are not. So what is the ego? The ego is a teacher, one that will carry you with each day. When seen in this light, the ego is the most powerful and persistent teacher that we have to wake us up to the truth that has always been here and will always be here. Now, you might be sitting here wondering, listening to me right now, wondering why I just spoke about the ego. Why do I keep bringing this up? I talk a lot about the ego in many previous other shows that I've done. The thing is that we put ourselves into limiting beliefs. We are who we are, and that is that. It has a lot to do with destiny, free will, and fate. It all plays a part. Now, if we move on to karma, one of the most interesting concepts that we all stumble across in our lives sooner or later is that of karma. In fact, karma is such an important teaching that it features in many of the world's major religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. But what is karma? And really, how does it influence you? But karma really essentially means that this happened because that happened. In other words, karma is the law of cause and effect. Karma can also be neatly defined through Newton's third law. Every action has an equal or opposite reaction. And the butterfly effect. You notice that I'm starting to bring out some of these explanations from the very beginning of the show. The butterfly effect also supports the idea of karma. That every single occurrence in life has a ripple effect through time, no matter how small. Therefore, according to the law of karma, every thought, feeling, desire, choice, action, and reaction that we have has some kind of impact on our future. Quite literally, our thoughts shape our reality, and that means the place that you find yourself in right now is directly a result of your past thoughts, feelings, and decisions. Or in the nutshell, karma. But let's talk about the law of karma. And I'd like to make a statement. The kingdom of hell is within you. Jesus once asked when the kingdom of God would come. The kingdom of God, Jesus answered, is not something people will be able to see and point to at. Instead, he said, Luke chapter 17, verse 21, neither shall they say, Lo here, lo, or lo there. For behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Jesus spoke a truth that is timeless and universal. And I've read through many religious holy books and spiritual scripts, and often they all share the same precept, that life's greatest treasure is ultimate truth resides within us. But what about the kingdom of hell and the devil? Is hell within us? My experience is that hell is not a flaming hole underneath the earth. Hell is actually a spiritual place of torment that we carry around every day. You see glimpses of heaven and glimpses of hell around us every day. We see heaven in the magnificent beauty and acts of goodness we experience, and in hell in the wretched feelings we experience and injustices we perceive. Few people don't know that the word sin comes from the Greek word hamartia, which when actually translated actually means to miss the mark or to miss the target. This changes the whole modern day concept of sin. When we are small, we're taught that to sin is to be a terrible person. So many of us carry around the guilt of the mistakes that we've made, thinking that we're horrible people. And yeah, I grew up in a Christian household, and the discovery of the true definition of sin revolutionized my perception of life entirely, which led me to become an omnist. I had been taught that sinning had something to do with being wrong, to be a bad person. But the true definition means to make a mistake. It means that I wasn't a bad person through guilt, and that I only had done something misguidedly through shame. Sins were meant to be a guideline to help us through life in such a way as to cause the least amount of harm possible to ourselves and to others. And deep down, before I discovered this revelation, I only felt constant guilt for being a bad person. If sin is seen an act of badness, it makes you feel guilty and dirty. And I couldn't feel like a religious person with this at all in this mindset. In fact, guilt became a barrier to experience any divine feelings of gratitude and love. Just think about it. When we have primal instinct and we talk about sex, there's a perfect example in relation to what I just said. But have you heard about the devil called karma? In Matthew chapter 5, verse 29, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. But if you were to take Jesus' words literally at face value, he would sound like a ruthless brute. But Jesus was a loving man. And with this new understanding of sin, you really see what he was really trying to say. If one eye is making you perceive the world sinfully, get rid of it. It's a metaphor that tries to teach us to become aware of whatever is making us sin and remove it. Karma is often thought of as external force that creates justice, that balances the world out. It teaches us that bad people have bad things happen to them. The mistake of the sins concept is thinking that changing the external acts will change the internal being as well. Changing the surface of something by making you afraid of it cannot change at its core or the source of the behavior. To change where it ends, external actions, you have to change where it begins. The way you perceive it. Perception. You also often see people complain about the same mistakes. For example, women complaining that they always end up with the wrong guys that cheat on them or take them for granted. Repeat offenses are also very common amongst criminals who, according to statistics, reoffend almost 50% of the time of the ones that are caught. Why does this happen? The mystical religion of the Upanishads consider the concept of sin as darkness. They teach that the reason why we sin, the reason why we cause harm to ourselves and to others is because we are unaware. But if you shed some light into your darkness, if you become more alert and start questioning your continuous unconscious habits, then you'll stop sinning. Karma is wrongly confused with the notion of having a fixed destiny. The truth is that karma is constantly in the making, and we have an accumulation of tendencies all the way back to childhood that can lock us into particular behavioral patterns. So, for instance, if I'm a criminal, commit crimes, and have surrounded myself with other criminals from a young age, I shouldn't be surprised if something bad happens to me. Not because I'm a bad person, but because my negative behavior and perception of life attracts negative forces around me. If you are alert, if you are mindful of everything that you do, then bad things stop happening as much as they do when you live with unmindfulness. In fact, you begin to see the true consequences of your sinful actions or impulses to both yourself and to other people, and you begin to make decisions to avoid doing them. Breaking the chain. For instance, giving into sinful temptation by seeking quick stimulation, by cheating on my partner, which have long-lasting consequences in the form of guilt and negative emotions, these will affect my relationship, possibly resulting in its termination and both of our unhappiness. Instead, with mindfulness, I can become more aware of my dissatisfaction, communicate it, and try to create stronger bonds through activities with my partner to find greater stimulation again. It's easy to blame karma for all these bad things that has happened to us. But it's easy to attribute our suffering to external forces that are out of our control. But these aren't responsible. In fact, we carry out karma with our lack of mindfulness and awareness. It's our actions that cause our mistakes and our quote-unquote sins. But the devil comes in many forms. Aimless television watching, eating fast food instead of preparing your own, playing vacuous games on your smartphone and holding grudges instead of communicating them. There are many ways we commit quote-unquote sins against ourselves every day. We all carry a devil inside of us, trying to trick us into indulging primitive pleasure, impulses, violence, stimulation, sex, or habitual addictive behaviors. We've all experienced this internal conflicts, this duality, this good versus evil, refraining ourselves from wanting to do things or something because we know it's bad. Hell is a place that is ever present. It exists when you miss the mark of being mindful in your sinful temptations that harm yourself and others. Hell is a cycle of endless suffering. If you've ever found yourself inside one of those life cycles where you've hit rock bottom, making mistake after mistake, it feels like it's an eternal no way out. If the kingdom of heaven, God, or the kingdom of God is only a mindful action away, then why not try it? Religion's only concern should be with your behavior and your personal responsibility. And deep down, isn't that what religion is all about? Even spirituality. And yet somehow we always focus on other people and their sins. Preoccupying ourselves with other people's mistakes is a good way to feel relief by avoiding the focus on our own. Once you see sin as a transgression to yourself without the deadly religious punishment element, it becomes a very helpful tool to enhance and understand the quality of your life. You should start by asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now harming myself or someone else in some way? Could I be doing something that would benefit me more? There's a reason why sloth is on that 7 sinful mistakes list. Thinking of sin as creating harm against ourselves is much more useful than thinking of it as violating a spiritual code of conduct or destined karma force. And you see the results in this lifetime as well. And on that note, we are going to take a break, and you are listening to Somafusion Radio on Somafusion Media with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara. And tonight we are talking about destiny and free will.
How could I decide what's right when you're clouding up my mind? I get when you're losing fight all the time. No can I ever own what's mine when you're always taking sides, but you won't take The truth is hiding in your eyes, and it's hanging on your tongue, just boiling in my blood. Right, you think that I can't see what kind of man that you are? If you're a man at all, well, I will figure this one out on my own. On my such fools of ourselves. Do you see what we've done? We're gonna make such fools of ourselves.
Said goodbye, that's what you told me once. So many times we've made our peace. But this is love, I'll never give you up. I know you'll always come home to me. Like a river, always running, I keep losing you. Like a fire, always burning, I'll be here for you. If you're ready, heart is open, I'll be waiting. Come find me. If you're searching for forever, I'll be waiting. Come find me. I see you here in the darkness, blinding light, right where your heart is. If you're ready, heart is open, I'll be waiting. Come find me. Lost our way, that's what you told me. Lost, but tears they come and go. This is us, I'll never get enough. It's taken losing you to know. If you're ready, heart is open, I'll be waiting. Come find me. If
And we are back. You are listening to Somafusion Radio on Somafusion Media with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara. And tonight we are talking about destiny and free will. And I was going over about the devil called karma. And now I'd like to switch some gears and talk about good and bad karma. Have you ever heard of the expression, what goes around comes around? Of course you have. And that's a given. Everybody has heard that statement. There are songs being made about it. Now, this basically is a modern way of saying, look at that poor sucker. He got what he deserved. And perhaps rightly so. Our decisions determine our fate. But is there really such a thing as good or bad karma? I'm going to tell you yes and no. Subjectively, some situations in life can be seen as good. You might be comfortable and enjoyable, or bad, uncomfortable and unenjoyable. But here's the thing. Our definitions of good and bad are dependent on who we are. Now, you might see that everything's starting to come together on why I spoke specifically about the ego. This is dependent on who we are, what we believe, and how we perceive life. Again, they're very, very changeable. And here's an example. Because of your past choices, a woman becomes divorced from her abusive husband. On the outside, her friends feel sorry for her. Bad karma. But on the inside, this woman is thankful for her karma, which taught her courage and self-respect. So who is right and who is wrong here? Was this woman's karma good or bad? Here's another example. A drug-addicted man gets into a head-on collision with his car, ends up killing another driver and permanently losing one of his legs. The man's family is shocked and saddened by his bad karma. But after recovering from his near-death experience, the man experiences a spiritual awakening. He sees his recovery as a second chance and dedicates the rest of his life to help recovering drug addicts find hope. Was this man's karma good or bad? The problem is with labels. When it comes to karma, there's really no such thing as objectively good or bad karma. Subjectively, our karma may have had the appearance of being good or bad, but in the end, karma is karma. It has no inherent label attached to it other than what we give it. And this gives us the choice to work with our karma and change our destiny, regardless of how negative we perceive it to be. Which leads me to the next topic. Can I change my karma? In short, the answer is yes. Yes, you can change your karma. Unfortunately, karma is often confused with the false idea of a fixed destiny. Instead, karma is more to do with the accumulation of tendencies and habits that can lock us into certain patterns of living. It is easy to become imprisoned by our karma and think that the cause of it lies out there and out of our control, never in here and within our control. Searching for the answers to your suffering in the external world and blaming it on mysterious karmic forces is just another way of avoiding self-responsibility. There is no external punishment system here. We aren't children. We're adults. We're grown adults. Karma isn't a way to punish you. It's a natural law of the universe that effortlessly flows from your actions, none other than from your actions. Realize that you are solely responsible for your karma. You create it and you can change it. And yes, it is possible to get fixed into a rigid pattern of thoughts and beliefs. But these mental habits can be broken through self discipline. And you might be wondering right now, if you're listening out there, you might be wondering, but what about my past? I've done so many bad things. How can I really change my karma now? Of course you can change your karma. Life gives you endless chances to redeem yourself. Why do you think religions such as Christianity put so much emphasis on confession and repentance? Just as an example. Acknowledging and feeling remorse for what you have done is a powerful spiritual tool. Without these two elements, there is no hope for change. So if you want to start changing your karma, start by acknowledging the mistakes that you have made and allow yourself to grieve them. And you might even start off with a simple prayer. It might go like this. Dear life, spirit, or God, whatever floats your boat, I know that many of my past decisions and actions have been based in anger, hatred, and fear. I openly acknowledge all that I have done in the past and ask for guidance and help. Although I have hurt many people, including myself, I pray that I could turn over a new leaf and start fresh. I deeply wish to change my habits for good. May my resentment, prejudice, selfishness, and mistreatment of others be turned into love, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. Amen. Or so mote it be. Whatever you choose. And every morning, dedicate some time saying this prayer, or one of your choosing. And most importantly, take action. And I'm going to explore this towards the end of this segment. But what about karma brownie points? One of the most seemingly innocent but distasteful misuses of karma is to support the idea of getting rewarded for being nice to others. I call this karma brownie points. It's kind of like the Christian notion of converting other people to the faith in order to get brownie points for heaven. It's just as nauseating. It's natural to be nice and to do good because it makes you feel good. But to give to others solely in order to receive is like giving someone $100 and expecting them to give it back to you later with interest. Indeed, giving itself is receiving. When we give, the reward itself is the feeling that we get from being generous and helping someone out. And that is from a sincere standpoint. But to give in order to have your good karma pile up is misguided. The thing with karma is that it doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes we have to wait years. Sometimes our karma arrives with us even knowing it, or knowing what form it's taken from. Therefore, when it comes to doing good to get good things, my way of saying karma brownie points, many of us are feeling left disappointed. But what if you say, I'm always so nice to everyone around me, yet my life is miserable. And so many people are left complaining. Why is it that no matter how much I do for others, I never get rewarded? The problem here lies with expectation. The expectation of a reward in the first place. In other words, the problem lies in the belief of karma brownie points. And not only that, the belief that our repayment will be something that we desire. In fact, life may reward you with other extremely painful, but life challenging and changing opportunities for growth. And how could you possibly know? I think it's naive that karma will reward us with sunshine and roses just because we're friendly and kind to others. Life doesn't want to keep a tally of your good deeds to keep track of your annual dividends. It isn't an accounting firm. Wake up. You ain't some kind of loyal shopper. There's no reward points here. But certainly the karmic laws follows the principle like produces like. And yes, your life will get better if you treat others with respect. But the point here is not to act out of quid pro quo, this for that, but out of joy and love without conditions in the present moment. And all throughout the internet and many social media sites, you'll find lots and lots of memes such as this. Karma. And I quote, "No need for revenge, just sit back and wait. Those who hurt you will eventually screw themselves up. And if you're lucky, God will let you watch." Here's another one. Ignorant people think that they can treat you like shit and get away with it. But what they don't realize is what comes around goes around. I just love the smell of karma in the air, don't you? Here's another one. Karma is like a rubber band you can only stretch it so far before it comes back and smacks you in the face. And that's when I want to be there to laugh. And the last one. To make a demon feel the pain he inflicts, let cruelty, pain, and evil ways follow his villain through all of his days. Reverse the torment he creates to turn on him. It's true that we all get screwed over by people in life. And understandably, this makes us upset and angry. But remember this, it's also completely normal. But unfortunately, karma is frequently used as a way of addressing hatred and ill will, as a spiritual righteousness, as if karma can somehow justify your resentful feelings. Ironically, the very act of using karma as a vehicle for wishing harm onto others creates bad karma. Taking joy in another person's suffering, even if it is perceived as justice, is another way to perpetuate negative karma in your own life and the world. Which is why I teach mindfulness. But is my suffering the product of karma? Well, yes, and maybe no. It is true that our thoughts create our reality. Think fearful thoughts, and our lives will be full of fear. Judge, and we will be constantly judged. Value ourselves poorly, and others will value us poorly. But what about those born congenitally blind, deaf, or maimed since birth? What about those born into poverty and war-torn countries? What about those parents who lose their children in horrific accidents? There are so many examples that can be raised. And while some people try to pinpoint karma and past life karmic debt as the cause, I personally believe that not everything in this life is the cause of karma. The experiences that you have in this life do not always reflect the consequences of something bad that you did in the past. Instead, these experiences are presented for you to soulfully evolve on a spiritual level. Life doesn't bring us what we want, it brings us what we need. That is often why challenging and painful situations come into our life. As the ego, the I, me, my, is an illusionary construct created by the mind. It does not survive after death. As such, there is no such thing as ego karmic debt, because in truth, there is no such thing as the individual separate self. But there is something called collective karma. In other words, as interconnected beings, our thoughts, our decisions, our actions as a whole establish the future. If we create division and separation between our countries now, for instance, we will set in place the environment for war, disease, poverty to occur in the future. This is why children are born into horrific conditions, because our collective choices on this plane of existence is occurring. For example, if a father is abusive to his son, he not only abuses himself, but he abuses his abuse spreads across time. His abused son might become abusive towards his own son, and that son will become abusive to his son, and so on and so forth. Because of the father's behavior, he will suddenly impact generations upon generations of people, and along the way, his behavior will impact all those who come in contact with his prodigy. And all of those people will influence all of those people around him. Eventually, this will ripple out towards all people. This is why, in a sense, we all carry the karma from our past, because all our past actions that went before us have influenced our biology, our genetic predispositions, parental experiences, environmental values, external tragedies, and internal wounds. Our identities are the sum of all karmic debt that has gone before us. But collective karma also gives us an amazing opportunity. Our lives, our very decisions and choices can appear small, but they also have a very large impact that continues far longer than our individual egos survive. In other words, one decision can impact all of existence. This gives you a new dimension to the words, you create your reality. Whatever form spirit, which is your true nature, decides to incarnate as in the future, will be determined by your decisions that you make this very moment. You are literally influencing the present and the future in a myriad of ways each and every single day, whether you know it or not. So how do you rewrite your karma? There's no such thing as a permanently fixed future. You can make new karma, but there is only one time that you can ever have to do that, and that is right now. Rewriting your karma involves becoming conscious with your inner thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. This is something to work on every single day of your life. And you have to follow through with the following practices. Mindfulness. This is perhaps the most powerful technique of all. Spend time every day learning how to observe your inner chatter without identifying with it. And this leads to self-awareness. Gratitude. Say thank you for all that you have every day. Thank other people for gracing your life as well. Forgiveness. Learn to forgive those who have done you wrong. Forgiveness always starts with yourself first. Acceptance. Stop resisting life and other people. Get out of your own way. Learn to flow with life and all of its lessons, painful or not. Love. Before you can unconditionally love others, you must work firstly to love every bit of yourself. Purpose. Having a sense of purpose gives us direction, hope, and empowerment. Listen to your soul and the mission it has for you. And lastly, generosity. Give to others out of an open heart, just for the pure joy of it, and see how their lives are changed in the very smallest of ways. And we've heard this one before. Even a hug or a kind word can transform a day. The knowledge of karma transforms you into a more mature, accountable, and loving person. With this understanding, I hope that you can pave a path of inner peace and mindfulness, not only for yourself, but for generations to come. Jesus said, "In the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought." But when we talk about that, we talk a lot about thoughts and feelings and beliefs and all of that. And how do we rationalize with internal conflict just so that we can find peace of mind? You know that your mind and heart feel like they're split in two. And you want to do something, but another part of you is saying, screaming, "No way! I can't do that." You believe in something, but you just cannot condone an action that belief teaches. You feel like something is right, but then you also feel it's wrong. It's kind of like the depiction of the devil and the angel on the shoulders. And how can you really make any sense of all of this mess, this internal conflict? You feel like your brain is melting and you're starting to get desperate. Things aren't going right. And you feel like you're going a little crazy, or the confusion is getting too much to handle to stop right now. Just pause what you're doing. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. And for the next minute, focus on just your breathing, going in and out. Come on, let's do it. Breathe in and breathe out. It's not that hard. Breathe in and breathe out. And keep doing it. And hopefully, It'll help you get to the root of your internal conflict and how you can find inner peace of mind. But what is internal conflict? Internal conflict is the experience of having opposing psychological beliefs, desires, impulses, or feelings. In my field, the field of psychology, internal conflict is often referred to as cognitive dissonance, which is a term that refers to holding conflicting and inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. And this mental struggle can occur at any point in life over any topic such as relationships, work commitments, religious beliefs, moral standpoints, or social ideologies. An example of internal conflict would be a person who believes in women's rights but does not condone abortion. Internal conflict can be seen in relationships where one person loves their partner but they don't feel emotionally available. In the religious world, internal conflict often occurs when one is faced with a doctrine or teaching that they are uncomfortable with propagating. Someone once said, "Your worst battle is between what you know and what you feel." When we experience any type of internal conflict, what is really happening is that there is a disagreement between our heart and our head. And it's shown by research conducted by places such as Heart Math Institute. Our hearts carry their own special kind of intuitive intelligence. As we were raised in societies that were and still are dominated by the mind, we become very, very confused and disconcerted about when our hearts get involved in everyday matters. It is very easy to listen to the mind, mindlessly obey what others teach us, and logically plan our lives. But our hearts carry their own special kind of intelligence. An intelligence that is nonlinear, subtle, and very abstract. There is no formula or set of rules that are attached to the heart's intelligence. And it is up to us to tune into the voice within, which is often what confuses us so much. I've always said right from the very beginning on many previous shows, being logical all the time can become a sickness. Our head intelligence is what helps us to give our lives structure, direction, and practical application. But our heart intelligence is what breathes life and truth into this framework of our life journey. Without listening to our hearts, we live soulless, unfulfilling, and inauthentic lives. But without listening to our heads, we live in absolute chaos. And as you can see, balance is needed. We can listen to both the heart and to the head. But often we tend to value one over the other, which causes us to experience internal conflict. So why does this internal conflict occur? It occurs because we lack the equanimity and balance between the heart and the head. Our heart says one thing, but our mind says the other. And both shout at the same intensity. When our actions don't match our values, the inevitable result is a feeling of discomfort and maybe perhaps even shame. So which do we listen to? When and why? We'll explore that answer to that very soon. But first, we need to understand what creates internal conflict in the first place. We experience internal conflict for a number of reasons, and often there is not one single cause or origin. But there are a number of factors that we can include. Number one, the beliefs and rules that we inherited from our parents. Number two, the religious beliefs, dogmas, and creeds that we were indoctrinated to believe. And number three, the societal values and ideals that we adopted growing up. Putting it quite simply, the more mental beliefs and ideals and expectations and desires that we have, the more likely we are to suffer from internal conflict. And what you might ask about, what are the internal conflicts that we can experience? There are many different types of internal conflicts. And I'm going to try and attempt to cover as many as I can. Just to give you an example. So when I'm going to give you the types of internal conflicts, just take away what you want or pay close attention to the ones that you resonate with. The first one, moral conflict. Moral conflict arises when we hold conflicting beliefs about something to do with our personal ethics. For example, moral conflict could occur when a person believes in human rights but doesn't believe in euthanasia. Or a person could value telling the truth but lie to save another person's life. Number two, sexual conflict. Sexual conflict often overlaps with other types of internal conflicts such as religious or moral conflict. For example, a person might be a faithful Christian, but they discover that they're homosexual. Or a person might value monogamous relationships when they are sexually better suited to polyamorous relationships. Number three, religious conflicts. Religious conflict is quite common because it revolves around beliefs, and beliefs are very mind-oriented, making them particularly fragile. Examples of religious conflicts could be believing in a loving God, but finding it hard to accept that this loving being sends people to hell for eternity. Or a person who is religiously faithful but also believes in the use of medical marijuana, which is still classified as a drug. When faced with scientific facts, religious conflict may arise within a person who values both truth and their religious belief. Number four, political conflict. Political conflict arises when a person feels split between their own beliefs and their political party's beliefs. For example, a person may believe in America but doesn't believe in paying taxes. A person may align with one party but disagree with their treatment of the healthcare system. Or a person may believe in the political philosophy but struggle to support the politician propagating it. Number five, love conflict. Love conflict is what happens when we love someone yet we want to do something that hurts them. For example, we may love our children but believe we have to smack them to make them obedient, which causes us to feel guilty or sometimes even wish we didn't have children at all. We may love our partners, but find their habits to be intolerable, which causes us to act out. We may also love a person and wish to keep them, but realize we have to let them go. Number six, self-image conflict. Your self-image is a mental idea that you have about yourself. For example, my name is Karen. I'm a patient, loving and compassionate person. I'm a disorganized artist who supports the rights of animals, etc. Internal conflict arises when we are met with evidence that contradicts our beliefs about ourselves. For example, a person who believes that they're honest may lie on their resume to get their dream job. Someone who takes pride in healthy eating might not want to give up smoking. A person who identifies as an empath may feel constant resentment towards another person. Or a person may believe that they're ethical but might enjoy buying clothes that contributes to sweatshops. Number 7, interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict overlaps with other types of internal conflict, such as self-image and love conflict. This type of conflict occurs when social situations happen, when you want to be one way but find yourself acting in another way. For example, Sally hates talking about sports, but she finds herself faking interest in what her co-workers talk about. An introvert doesn't have much energy but creates a high energy facade in order to fit in with others. Or someone is offended by a friend but says nothing even though they want to. And number 8, existential conflict. Existential conflict involves feelings of discomfort and confusion about life, particularly when two opposing beliefs or desires arise. For instance, hating life but loving life at the same time, or wanting to live life to the fullest but not wanting to make any changes or get out of the comfort zone. Existential conflict can also be directed towards the world. For example, wanting to save our planet but at the same time believing that it is doomed. And just note that all of these examples of internal conflict frequently overlap with each other. And so my list of examples is not definitive. But how do we find peace of mind? All war originates within us as internal conflict. And what is the root cause of internal conflict? Attachment to beliefs, desires, and expectations. And quite simply, all of our suffering occurs when we believe our thoughts instead of seeing them for what they truly are. Passing fluctuations of energy within the brain. Do we control our thoughts? No. Otherwise, we would always end up choosing to think happy and harmonious thoughts. We don't even know what our next thought will be, or what our next 10 thoughts will be, because they all spontaneously arise and fall within the mind. If we don't control these thoughts, then how can they possibly mean anything about us unless we give them meaning? If you can truly understand what I've just said, you'll find that a lot of your internal conflict dissipates very, very quickly. And all you got to do is simply sit down for however long you want and try to take note of where your thoughts really come from. And ask yourself this: do you control them, or are they controlling you? But aside from that, I've got plenty of other tips that I can give you, which I hope can help you find more peace and more clarity. The first one, distinguish between intuition and fear. The intuitive voice within your heart is very clear, strong, and unemotional. However, the fearful voice is vague and emotionally charged. Learn how to distinguish between these two voices because they are often confused. And maybe perhaps later on throughout the year, I might do a show on how to trust your intuition. The second one. In the long term, what would be the wisest choice? When our heart dominates, we tend to make rash, poorly thought out decisions. This is where the head comes in. Foresight. Foresight is wisdom. With the limited knowledge that you have right now, what would appear to be the wisest decision in the long term? Number 3, weigh up the pros and cons. If you're struggling to find clarity, divide a page into 2 sides. List all the pros of your decision on one side and the cons on the other. Number 4, figure out your number 1 priority. Internal conflict often appears when we have no clear priority. What's your biggest priority at the moment? What do you value the most? Number 5, what mistaken beliefs are fueling your confusion? What false, misleading, limited, or second-hand beliefs are causing the conflict within you? Get a piece of paper, write down your problem on a page, and next to it, ask why. For example, you might want to keep your job but also crave to stay at home with your children. Asking why relentlessly, you might discover that you believe that staying home with your children makes you a failure. And you've adopted this belief from society. Number 6, be ruthlessly honest. What are you scared of? You know, fear always underlies internal conflict. What is inflaming your cognitive dissonance? What are you truly scared of? Sometimes discovering your underlying fear helps you gain more clarity and direction. Number 7, what is the lesser of 2 evils? If you had to choose, gun to your head, what decision would you make? Number 8, adopt a future perspective. From the perspective of you resting on your deathbed, what would you regret the most? Number 9, what is resisting the flow? One easy way to examine what is not meant to be is to examine what is causing the most resistance in your life. Remember, life flows effortlessly, like a river, fluid. It is our thoughts and desires that cut the flow. So explore what is creating the most resistance in your life. Are you clinging to that ship that sailed long ago? Number 10, what is a more loving approach? Are you honoring your authenticity or honoring what you think you should do or be? What approach or choice is more aligned with the truth, with love? Number 11, is there a more important underlying issue? Sometimes internal conflict actually hides deeper issues that need to be explored to find resolution, such as negative self-beliefs, unresolved shame, or childhood wounds. So by discovering more important underlying issues, we can get to the root cause. Number 12, relax your mind. Now, although that might sound really hard to do, relaxing your mind is a great way to develop new perspectives. Meditating, listening to soothing music, or practicing mindfulness exercises. Often the best answers come when we aren't looking for them. And number 13, final. Choose to stop participating. Do you need an answer right away, this very, very moment? Sometimes allowing life to move in the direction that it wants is a better option than forcefully blazing a path. And as teacher Wayne Dyer once wrote, and I quote, "Conflict cannot survive without your participation." And I really do hope these little tips can find you more peace of mind. Remember that it's completely normal to experience internal conflict. Let me tell you right now from my own experience, there's nothing weird about you. Absolutely nothing. Be who you are. And also, when it comes to internal conflict, people tend to romanticize the heart and also believe that we should only listen to whatever the heart wants. Remember, guys, this is an imbalanced approach. We need to use the heart as well as the brain so that internal harmony is created. Now we're going to have a break. You are listening to Somafusion Radio on Somafusionmedia with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara. And when we return, I'm going to be talking more about destiny and free will. And more specifically, when we come back, I'm going to be talking about why the law of attraction creates intense suffering. Not what you wanted to hear. But I want to start by clarifying something about LOA. Just to set the record straight. And we'll be right back.
Yeah, I don't believe in destiny. I just do what's best for me. Don't listen to my enemies, they're just full of jealousy. Yeah, this legacy, you gon' see what's left of me. You gon' see success in me. You ain't seen the rest of me. I just wanna be the best at what I know. Better than the rest, just watch me grow. Put me to the test and watch me go. This is my quest, I'ma make it known. They call me obsessive, oh I know. Call me selective with my notes. Call me aggressive with my flow. Call me offensive even though Joe, I ain't gonna lie, life's tough. Try to get by, life's rough. Try to do it right, it's not enough. Even though you try, you still mess up. But I'm still gonna fight for what I love. Still gonna die for what I love. Still gonna try, I won't give up. Still gonna fight until I've won. They say I'm way too obsessed and I've got nothing left. And I'm not quite there yet, but those words they'll regret. Cause I've got something left and I'm not giving in. I will not let them win. I won't stop till the end, no. 13, working hard and learning, never stopping searching, yeah, it's burning. All this passion hurts me. I took action working, writing down these words.
No, I'm not okay, I just wanna be something. I don't wanna be nothing, living all alone. No, I'm not alright, I'm just barely getting by. But I'll tell you I'm just fine, so you leave me alone. They say I'm way too obsessed and I've got nothing left. And I'm not quite there yet, but those words they'll regret. Cause I've got something left and I'm not giving in. I will not let them win, I won't stop till the end, no.
Pull up a chair, let me tell you how it went. Cause a guy like me, a girl like her just don't make sense. Was an overgrown kid, she had two of her own. Had to be a dad, become a man. Next thing I know, another kid on the way, and a wedding right after. Sounds about like a lifetime, but it's just the first chapter. Destiny sure got a hold of my heart, just like it's meant to be. You might say it was written in the stars. This unpredictable love made this beautiful life. I couldn't make it up, even if I tried, cause it's took a turn down the wrong place and time. He was 60 miles fast, running through a red light. The blue morning sky faded right on to black. Woke up staring at the ceiling. The good Lord had my back. When they pulled back that curtain, all that I seen was my heaven-sent angel. I sure do believe destiny sure got a hold of my heart, just like it's meant to be. You might say it was written in the stars. This unpredictable love made this beautiful life. I couldn't make it up, even if I tried, cause it's destiny. Life don't always make sense in the moment you're in. We're not promised tomorrow, yeah, every day's a gift. Nearly died in that car, so I wanna live. She said pick up that guitar, and I'm glad that I did. Destiny sure got a hold of my heart, yeah, like it's meant to be. You might say it was written in the stars. This unpredictable love made this beautiful life. I couldn't make it up, even if I tried, cause it's destiny. Yeah, yeah.
Right now, I know nobody really knows us, but one day they're gonna know us, oh yeah. Right now my mama works the hardest. Promise I'm gonna pay that mortgage off. Last night when I went to Soho, tried to get in, it was a no-go. Fast forward a couple years, on the balcony, hella rich, with my day ones yelling cheers. That's why I kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway, till I make it in a million ways. Kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway. They can sleep on me, yeah, that's okay. It's destiny leading me, sliding down these pipe dreams, surfing on these melodies, making all these memories. I see you, you see me. Keep that same energy, sitting back and relaxing, feeling bad Michael Jackson. Yeah, I'm good while you asking, in my face while you acting, never running with fake ones, still surrounded by day ones. Yeah, kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway, till I make it in a million ways. Kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway. They can sleep on me, yeah, that's okay. Break it down, make it count. Break it down, ooh yeah. Break it down, make it count. Break it down, kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway, till I make it in a million ways. Kick and pushing on it every day. I've been scheming up a getaway. They can sleep on me, yeah, that's okay.
And we are back. You are listening to Somafusion Radio on Somafusion Media with your host, Dr. Katie Kamara. And we are talking about destiny and free will. And now I want to switch gears and talk about the law of attraction and why, in my opinion, the law of attraction creates intense suffering. Now, before I start, I want to clarify something. It isn't the law of attraction itself that creates intense suffering. It is our usage and interpretation of the law of attraction that actually really harms us. And try to put that into a single title. Since the launch of the mega popular books like The Secret in 2006, the law of attraction has really skyrocketed in popularity. And these days you can find law of attraction principles sprinkled everywhere over social media and in endless self-help articles aimed at helping you to find happiness. Now, although many of these memes and articles and websites have good intentions, the majority of them misunderstand and misapply the law of attraction. And what it does is it leads to stress and anger and frustration and sadness. So, to understand what I'm talking about, we need to understand what the law of attraction is. And the law of attraction is just simply put a philosophy that is based simply on the premise that whatever you think, you attract. And therefore, if you think positive thoughts, you will manifest positive things. If you think negative thoughts, you will manifest negative things. And to an extent, this is true. It's called polarity. And we usually tend to think this does become the reality that we live in. And as the trendy cliche goes, your vibe attracts your tribe. And it's true. Whatever you think, you become. Whatever you focus on generally tends to appear in your life sooner or later. And naturally, this reality is very, very appealing to people because it suddenly feels like we have control. In fact, the law of attraction starts feeling like a magical fairy wand that we can wave and use it to manifest every single one of our heart's desires. But here's where the catch comes in. The moment that you use the law of attraction to intensely manifest your desires is the moment you start opening the door of suffering. And you might be sitting there going, well, hold up, I've been using this for forever and a day. Why would law of attraction create intense suffering for myself? Because, in my opinion, I find that focusing on manifesting is limited and exhausting since it leaves God out. Or faith, call it what you will. It often involves a shopping list of what the ego wants to get from the universe. And by its very nature, that's profoundly limited. Simply type in the law of attraction on places like Pinterest or Facebook, and you'll see picture after picture and blog piece after blog piece instructing you on how to manifest your heart's desires. And there are plenty of life coaches that do advertising on this very subject. And you'll see pictures that say things like, believe you deserve it and the universe will serve it. Or be the energy you want to attract. Create the feeling first and then the having will come. It's okay for me to have everything I want, etc. And you'll also see blog posts entitled things like 7 Secrets of Manifesting Money Instantly, or How to Create a Vision Board That Works, or 6 Daily Laws of Attraction Hacks, or How to Design Your Ideal Life with the Law of Attraction, or maybe perhaps 11 Ways to Manifest Weight Loss, and so on and so forth. Do you see the overarching theme here? The law of attraction has become so massively popular in the spiritual and mainstream world because it is all about get. In fact, the law of attraction has become the face of what famous Buddhist teacher Kogyam Trungpa, forgive my pronunciation here, calls spiritual materialism. In other words, the law of attraction is being used as a way to spiritualize desire and attachment, both of which creates endless suffering. I mean, don't get me wrong here. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have more money or to find your true love or to achieve your goals. So don't get me all confuddled and your knickers tied in a knot. But when you believe all of these things will bring you the happiness that you want, you're stuck on another hamster wheel of suffering. The law of attraction starts to reinforce enslavement and obsession with desires rather than being a valuable tool to use mindfully. The more you try to chase and manifest things, the further you get from the truth and the true happiness that can be found right here in the present moment, regardless of what you do or you don't have. And even when you do get what you so desperately want, you start fearing that it'll be taken away from you. So you start to cling to protecting and fighting to keep what you've been given. Does this sound like a recipe for peace or well-being to you? And what hurts the most is when your desires aren't fulfilled. And you're left feeling frustrated and sad and desperate and inadequate. And you hear people in the spiritual community or just in everyday life telling you that your vibration must be so low or your thoughts are not positive enough. Instant gratification and condemnation to justify that the manifestation is not working when our desires aren't fulfilled. And even if you've been passionately following the rules, even for months or even years, of course, this further deepens your bitterness, your emptiness, and your feelings of being a failure. I told you, hear me out. This is why I did an entire show on positive psychology. This is exactly the train you ride. But hold up. Your thoughts aren't responsible for everything that happens. One of the cruelest misapplications of the law of attraction is towards other people's suffering. Because of our mind's tendency to think in black and white terms, we tend to become dogmatic about certain ideas very, very quickly. And this also happens and also applies to the law of attraction. Soon as we start to believe that people who lose their children to suicide or develop cancer do so because their thoughts are attracting their reality, or their so-called disease, or their vibration is manifesting these events. However, not only are these beliefs insanely simplistic and short-sighted, they also express an implicit lack of empathy towards others. And while our thoughts do have the tendency to create our reality, they are not the sole causes for certain situations in our lives. Now, to give you a perfect example, when I went through a loss of a child, without thinking, somebody said to me, everything happens for a reason. Would you say that honestly to a grieving mother? No, you wouldn't. Because we think about ourselves before we actually think about what we say to other people, we become very short-sighted. And it gives you an exact example of the expression of the implicit lack of empathy towards others. It drives us to it. And while our thoughts have the tendency to create our reality, they are not the sole causes of our situations. Again, I'm repeating myself here so you can understand. And if our thinking was always 100% responsible for our reality, then we'd always get precisely what we'd want, when we want it. But life isn't a genie in a bottle. And let's face it, this notion is precisely why people obsess over the law of attraction so much. And also, if our thinking was entirely responsible for our reality, then whenever we think negative thoughts, our lives will always take a turn for the worst. But have you ever gone into an exam and thought, I'm going to do terribly and fail? But then later you found out that you passed and you did really, really well. Have you ever gone into a job interview and thought, I'm so nervous I'm going to screw this up? And then you pictured yourself near homeless but received a phone call the next day saying that you've been hired. The fact here is that our thoughts aren't solely responsible for our reality. Our vibration doesn't always attract experiences that match it. Otherwise, compassionate people wouldn't die horrible deaths, and cruel people wouldn't live fantastic lives. Think about that for a second. Let me repeat it. The fact here is that our thoughts aren't solely responsible for our reality. Our vibration does not always attract experiences that match it. Otherwise, compassionate people wouldn't die horrible deaths, and cruel people wouldn't live fantastic lives. And we so desperately want to make the law of attraction explain everything in life because it makes us feel safe, like we're in control. And that's understandable. It's only human nature that we do. But if we truly want to experience unconditional love and inner peace, we need to admit that there are some holes in this theory. We need to find the courage to be free of ideas that are inherently limiting. Let me put it this way. The abbreviations that you hear so much, law of attraction, which abbreviated is LOA. Let me rephrase it and give you another abbreviation. The LOA, abbreviated as lust, obsession, and attachment. And as I mentioned before, the law of attraction is not the problem here. It's the people's use and interpretation of it is the problem. It's the same situation when I, on another show that I did about twin flames. Twin flames is limerence. A lustful obsession with finding the other half of ourselves. And when used and understood through the ego, the law of attraction becomes more about lust, obsession, and attachment more than anything else. And not only that, greed. Because we want. Desire turns into want, and we keep going for it because whatever we get, we attract. Good or bad. And the more good things that come to us, the more that we want, and we become greedy. It's like the pursuit of happiness. We start believing that happiness can only be found in the future when we obtain or change something. But there is, in fact, a serious flaw to this philosophy. Sure, on the surface that it may be fun and exciting to finally attract what we've been manifesting, visualizing, and creating vision boards about. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is the equivalent of getting a shot of heroin or going on a massive roller coaster ride, the adrenaline rush. Euphoria. But afterward, when that little buzz dies off, we start looking for more and more to manifest. We start viewing our lives through the lens of, what can I get more of? I just explained it. We start to get greedy. And very soon we are constantly chasing and chasing and chasing what we believe deep down will finally fulfill fill us. How many people use the law of attraction to attract the income that they desire? Well, what happens when you become that millionaire? Is money everything to you? You become nothing but a consumer. Money may make the world go round. However, it never gives us full satisfaction and happiness. It brings us more problems. And very soon, we become obsessed and addicted to a vision of what our lives could be if only we just raise our vibration high enough and manifest all that we want. But paradoxically, the more you try to think positive thoughts about what you want to attract, the more negative thoughts and feelings arise about how inadequate your life is or who you are as a person. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you start feeling more and more anxiety and frustration and desperation. And these little nagging feelings are either repressed and they explode at a later date or fought off with positive thinking. So what are you doing? You're masking yourself. Essentially, a war arises inside of your mind in which you are constantly battling yourself in an attempt to get what you desire because you believe it will make you happy. Can you see how really, really messed up this is? Really? Now, I've explored in numerous articles that I write, and I've posted them. True abundance and happiness is not something you get. It's something that you already are. And thankfully, there's no need to give a shopping list to the universe of all your desires because the universe, which is you at your core, already knows what's best for your growth and well-being. And sometimes you'll be thrown challenges or the things that appear bad at first. But later you discover that they actually helped you to evolve and find your true joy. Other times you will experience good things which may turn out to harm you, which may later turn you to grow stronger. And it will help it. Can you see how nothing is linear? Everything is connected. Everything is perfectly orchestrated. There is no need to worry. As endless spiritual teachers and masters have always pointed out through the ages, and myself included, true abundance and happiness can only ever be found in the present moment, not in the past, not in the future, in the present. And your mind and ego will try to convince you that we need special spiritual techniques to get more abundance and more happiness, when in truth, all the true abundance and happiness can be found within you right now. The more you chase for happiness, the more it will elude you. The more you attach, the more you suffer. The more you want, the more lacking you will feel. So how do we really fulfill your destiny? Simply put, as long as you are consciously seeking to learn, grow, and spiritually evolve, you are fulfilling your destiny already. Ladies and gentlemen, open your eyes. If you're wanting to achieve your highest potential, right here, right now. I'm going to give you some tips that you might benefit from. The first one, develop self-understanding. There are so many resources out there, including myself, my other shows that I have on Somafusionmedia. There are many other coaches, gurus, call it what you will, leaders that will help you understand who you are better. There are lots of personality or psychology tests out there, little mini quizzes that you can find all over the internet. That's a good starting place. I will suggest, though, to take it with a grain of salt. You could be doing the MBTI. You could be doing the DISC test. You could be doing the Enneagram. But you need to take those little personality tests with a grain of salt. And you need to keep checking in with those tests once you start them every so often. Because just like we evolve, personalities also evolved. Find out what you're passionate about. I've always said this. When you're at an impasse and you want to know where to go and you can't figure it out and you're indecisive, find out what sets your soul on fire, what excites and thrills you. What do you admire and deeply enjoy doing? And make sure that you keep on doing whatever fulfills you. Surround yourself with supportive people who inspire you. Critics and judgmental people often trigger huge amounts of self-doubt within us. Sometimes we actually listen to these unsupportive people who tell us how to live our lives, resulting in us choosing the wrong path. Identify these people in your life who are negative influences and remove them. Or reduce the contact. And seek out kind, inspiring, and empathetic friends. And if it happens to be your family, then so be it. You can't choose your family, but you can surely cut ties and reduce the contact. Permit yourself to move out of your comfort zone. Often the biggest life changes occur when we make bold decisions. Sometimes fulfilling your destiny means getting a little bit uncomfortable, or even making a terrifying leap of faith. Whatever the case may be, make sure that you listen to your intuition and also use logic where necessary. Identify with your limiting beliefs. When we believe our thoughts, we experience anger, insecurity, sadness, shame, and anxiety. The number one greatest block most people experience when trying to fulfill their destiny are the core beliefs. Core beliefs are the main ideas we carry about ourselves, which we were conditioned to believe since birth. Common core beliefs meaning I am unworthy. I am stupid. I am a bad person. And I don't deserve happiness. Ask other people for support. Just know that you don't need to travel your journey alone. And if you need some guidance, seek out help from a loved one, a counselor, or a spiritual teacher. People who have walked this path before, who can share a lot of wisdom, which will benefit you greatly. And as I like to say, a simple prayer of asking for guidance when you need help. Prayer doesn't have to be religious. You can pray to life, the universe, the spirit, mystery, whatever moves you. Pray to a duck. It doesn't matter. Whatever moves you. But reach out. You might make mistakes in connecting with the wrong people for advice, but that is life. Don't judge yourself for it. Don't be hard on yourself for it. Because you will find the right person. The right person will walk into your life when you least expect it. Make a list of your strengths. This simple practice can help you direct your energy into a more sustainable and beneficial way. And remember that your setbacks are normal. There's no such thing as failure. It's only learning opportunities. Just a matter of perspective. Always flip it to a positive. If something doesn't go your way, take a deep breath. And realize that sometimes life just wants us to move in a different direction. There's nothing wrong with that. But in order to do that, you need to create goals. Goals that are clearly defined milestones, which can help you to get organized and prioritize what is important to you. And show some kindness to yourself. Don't be so hard. I just said that. The more love and compassion that you show towards yourself, the more you are naturally moving towards your ultimate destiny. But please be mindful of negative and critical thoughts and let them pass without attaching to them. You don't want to end up in suffering. Suffering leads to sabotage of ourselves. And that ultimately affects the people that we surround ourselves with. Be yourself. I will always be a very, very big advocate of being yourself. Because honestly, there's never been a person like you on the face of this planet. Ever. I am uniquely rare, and so are you. But I will suggest here, instead of imitating other people, explore what comes naturally to you, and you alone. There are too many people out there that are copycatting each other. So just be yourself. Explore your own style. Enjoy the peace and bliss that comes with not having to be someone that you're not. And ask yourself, what do I want most in life? And direct all of your attention towards fulfilling that goal. Do you want freedom, peace of mind, love? When all is said and done, everything returns back to the desire for happiness. However, remember that chasing happiness actually creates suffering. Happiness can never be found in the past or the future. It can only ever be found now, in the present moment. And therefore, to further refine the question that you might like to ask yourself. How can I enjoy life right now in this very present moment? And I honestly do hope to all of you out there that you discover the difference between fate and destiny. And of course, I've mentioned very, very subtly throughout this whole show about free will and the psychological rationale that we put ourselves through in thinking that we cannot control anything. And I hope these tips and helpful resources in this show tonight have inspired you to actively shape your life path rather than leaving it down to the forces of fate. And with that said, you are listening to Somafusion Radio on Somafusion Media with Dr. Katie Kamara. For more information, please look me up on social media. I'm on all the social media platforms. Or go to my website, soma-fusion.com or somafusionmedia.com. And please, please, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe out this show. Share with your friends and family about what we're learning each week. Invite them. I'm going to be back next week doing another massive show. And next week's show is going to be on grandiose toxicity. And we'll be talking about toxicity existing on a broad spectrum. And people who engage in a few of these behaviors in certain circumstances are not always malignant predators. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit broadly about how many emotional intelligent people often feel that they're a magnet for narcissists. And so I'm going to be speaking about the constant drama and pain narcissists cause and the humiliation that they cause other people and how demoralizing it is. And so any victim who has ever gone through this, he or she may embody a fatal flaw that attracts these narcissists. And yet this flaw may actually be a gift. And so I'm going to be showing you how to, and showing you the understanding about how this gift collides with a narcissist in different phases of any relationship that you have with them. And it can be in any setting. I'm not talking about relationships as a couple. This can be in any type of narcissistic relationship. It can go right from politics to the home, to the school, to the workplace. Like I said, toxicity exists on a spectrum. And so that show will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6 p.m. Pacific. As usual, on a Wednesday night, I will be doing these shows. I am officially back on air now, so I will be here every Wednesday night as my usual slot. I do have an entire month that's already planned out on that. So grandiose toxicity is actually on the 9th of February. On the 16th of February, we are going to be talking about the key, psychology being the key to diffusing politics. So if you're politically minded and you want to see how psychology and politics collide, that is a good show there. And on the 23rd is the final show of the month. We'll be talking about chronocentrism and whether it gets you into trouble. So that is what we have coming up. Please go again. We have many shows on Somafusion Media, so please check them out as well, not just mine. Again, Like and share out those shows. And until then, and I want to leave this thought or this passage that I wrote. And always to thine own self be true. When we find ourselves in a world where more and more arbitrary laws with all their petty fines are passed down onto us, then we need to listen to the inner voice. The need to hear and follow inner laws grows more urgent. And I'm not speaking about out of anarchy, chaos, mayhem. No, that would suggest that there is no sanctity in the lawfulness to the human spirit. I'm not talking about listening to the endless chatter and the babble that we can stream like a clutter-filled cafe with bad acoustics, pinging around in our heads. Imagine the advice the squabbling throng would give. I'm speaking of that voice that rings out clear as a bell, dropped from the heights, or those warm harmonic tones that arise to clarity from the heart. Mirrored by the great Romanesque domes and Orthodox cathedrals, the holy dome of our skull, that divine arch is designed to hold and to hear the loftiest thought of spirit. Trust that although we might get pushed adrift on emotive charged currents and sometimes wade waist deep in the mud of our own making, we are designed, orchestrated to hear the voice of timeless and thoughts of the God. Hear that clutter and seek it to subside. Venture into nature, sync with the rhythm of your steps. Let the flow of a new voice emerge. Sit quietly wherever you are, no matter the outer noise, and seek guidance with your muse, your star, your angel, and breathe. Listen. Allow calmness to emerge. May you be surprised, how I constantly am, at how quickly you will hear an answer to an honest question, like they are just waiting to be asked. So very, very ever generous. How to implement takes a little bit of skill and discernment, trial and error. You can seek counsel for that also. The inner voice and the advice that it proffers will bring its own gifts of clarity and courage with it. So take heart, for uncertainty can emerge. Even though what you hear may sound unorthodox to how the people in your world, and maybe perhaps yourself, have come to view you. And as we allow the innate lawfulness of who we truly are, each individually, to guide us, can you imagine how this world of ours will transform? And with that, I hope your week is filled with peace, joy, happiness, and precious moments. Love and blessings to all. See you next week. Love you.
Now that she's back in the atmosphere with drops of Jupiter in her head, she acts like summer and walks like rain, reminds me that there's a time to change. Since the return of her stay on the moon, she listens like spring and she talks like June. But tell me, did you sail across the sun? Did you make it to the Milky Way to see the lights all faded?
checks out mode, so while she does chapel, reminds me that there's room to grow. Now that she's back in the atmosphere, I'm afraid that she might think of me as plain old Jane Doe. Sorry about a man who was too afraid to fly, so he never did land. But tell me, did the wind sweep you off your feet? Did you finally get the chance to dance along the light of day and head back to the Milky Way? But tell me, did Venus blow your mind? Was it everything you wanted to find? And then you missed me while you were looking for yourself out there. Can you imagine no love, fried deep fried chicken? Your best friend always sticking up for you. Even when I know you're wrong, can you imagine no first dance, freeze-dried romance, 5-hour phone conversation, the best soy latte that you ever